Welcome everyone, and back to another Beyond Beliefs. This time, my co-host is going to be again the wait for it, the lovely Lilith. There she is. Always takes a little bit of time
Hello.
to turn on the monitor. Lilith, how have you been doing?
I've been all right. Oh, hush you. Sorry.
Yeah.
I think my roommate's dog's going to run upstairs, but I'm
Oh,
fine. It's incredibly dull. I didn't think the apocalypse would be this boring. I was anticipating more zombies and less sitting inside and face palming at Americans.
and you should be nicer on Twitter. So now you're in timeout. Just going to make fun of this because it's not just me being put in
It's
timeout.
not my fault that Twitter doesn't understand common idioms that have been around for 200 years.
Yeah,
200 years, Twitter.
it
If
happens.
Jane Austen was this close to using it, I can use it.
Yeah, I fully agree.
Anyway,
So our guest today is from a part of the world that we didn't have a guest before. He's from Eastern Europe. I met him on the comment section that we did on the show with Joseph Nolla, and just suggested, "Hey, do you want to come on?" And so he accepted. So let's welcome our guest for today, Dan Stoyen. Do I pronounce that correctly, by the way?
You got it mostly right. Thank you, Peter. And yeah, it's hello, Lilith, and hello, Peter. Again, it's nice to be with you tonight. And yeah, I guess hello everyone who's watching.
Okay.
Um,
So how do you pronounce your last name? Because that's just my interest.
so we're Latin people. We're actually Latin people surrounded by mostly Slavs. But my name is actually I think the origin is Slavic. It's like Bulgarian, but you pronounce it Stoyan. So
Okay,
sounds a bit
Stoyan?
weirder, probably. Yeah, sounds a bit weird because it's a bit Slavic.
I got it fairly well. So yeah, so let's start off. We had a brief chat before, so let's start off with the obvious question. Can you do a quick introduction of yourself and tell us what you believe, and then the more important part, why you believe it?
Sure. Okay. So yeah, to start with the basics, I'm a Christian. I was raised a Christian by my parents. I think mostly by both of my parents are Christian, but sort of my mother is the most let's say involved one or religious one. And uh, as sort of a custom here in Romania, most people are we're a secular state, but the predominant religion in the Balkans in general, it's Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodoxy. Somehow, uh, some people will disagree, but I think you can objectively say it's somehow very similar to Catholicism, Roman Catholicism. And yeah, this is sort of a. I was raised and educated in it. I had like a very nice upbringing, although there are some funny stuff I can relate to about later on. And yeah, this was pretty much it during uh, high school. And so actually in high school, I also come from, so part of my family is German. And the reason why that matters is I think sort of opposed to the United States or like Western Europe, people here are a bit like in the TV show, the comedy Everybody Loves Raymond, where I'm not sure if you're aware, Raymond, it's like he's Italian and he's also Roman Catholic, and he's something
Ah,
yeah,
something of a mama's boy.
yeah, he's like, you want to become Roman Catholic, but I don't get it, you're not Italian. And I guess what I'm trying to get to, it's like it's very custom, and somehow it's not so much that people have tons of religious experience and they experiment. Like, I believe Presbyterians are right, and therefore I became Presbyterian. So it's at least the environment in which I was brought up was sort of very static in that sense. Nobody really questioned a lot. But during high school, basically, I started question. I think very typical. I had questions about religion, faith in general, and is this just like Santa Claus, only that you get to grow up a bit more until you realize, well, God is not really there. We just sort of believe it, or maybe we do it from a formalism, or maybe we just pretend we believe and we keep on doing this because I know we've done it for so long.
Because rituals have been around, and I get presents at Christmas, so who cares?
And the reason that I mentioned was that in high school I started to try to take this more serious because I thought it was a serious subject, and by that I mean just to question that, and to think like, why are there people of other faiths, and do we care? Because it was very easy to see like, well, everyone is Eastern Orthodox. There's like no reason to question it. It could have been very comfortable, but at the same time, I realized like, yeah, because that's the local environment. But there are other Christians in the world. Like there are Coptic Orthodox or so on. And so, does this matter actually? And I thought it does matter. And I became much more. I did become a bit more skeptical. But I became much more close to my Lutheran part of the family, and to Western Christianity in general. Partly because having these questions, I somehow try to deal with them on a local level, meaning try to ask local Orthodox priests or so on, but I somehow felt the well was poisoned. Like, well, you're going to ask an Orthodox priest if Orthodox is okay. What do you think he's going to answer? And yeah, and so I tried to deal with this myself, and to do like independent research about it, and I got to see. And sort of fell in love with the Western tradition more, because I felt it tried to address the important questions like why are we doing this, and what about all the problems that modernism and basically that float around. I'm not sure, because I'm not a historian. I'm neither a theologian or a philosopher, so I'm not so qualified maybe to make such, but questions that sort of float around, I think, since Renaissance or so, or definitely since modernism, like what do we do with things like slavery in the Bible, or how is it that homosexuality is forbidden in the Bible, and yet we grow up to have an understanding that it's more natural, that we think it's a natural phenomenon, and all these sort of questions. And
so, if I'm understanding you correctly, you grew up sort of culturally Orthodox, and I do think in Europe, certain parts of Europe are very culturally secular, and other parts, as you said, if you're not Orthodox, you're not really Romania, you're not really one of us, it becomes this very cultural element, which, I can't begrudge people carrying on cultural traditions, but it seems to be less about whether it's true and more about in-group, out-group mentalities. Whereas you ended up pursuing, I'm assuming when you say Western Christianity, you're not referring to Western Catholicism, but more, because you mentioned Lutherans. Did you land in Protestant?
Well, that's why I tried to say, that's why I tried to say Western Christianity. I mean, both the Catholic, the Roman Catholic, and the Lutherans, I see them as belonging to the Western branch of Christianity, as opposed to the Eastern one, where there are, we Orthodox and Coptic Orthodox and Assyrians and so on. I feel like both of them, because Protestants came out of Catholics.
They did.
Yeah.
They did. And they got their Bible from the Catholics, which they like to forget frequently. And about half of their theology, they seem to have trimmed out a lot of, well, I mean, I can't exactly blame them for trimming out purgatory. That was a fun doctrine. But yeah, it's grown into quite the interesting family feud if you look over history and how many arguments and how much antagonism between different branches. Because I mean, Protestant Christianity also has lots and lots and lots. There's like 30,000 Protestant denominations, I think. And they can be very strongly opinionated on certain minute areas of theology. Yeah, it's so when you were reconsidering this, were you thinking this might be totally false? Were you looking at only other variations of Christianity, or what were you considering in your scope? I realize that's a rather broad scope of things to consider.
Yeah. So for one, I sort of always, I think, even since I was younger than that, in high school, I sort of had the idea that, well, you know, I know there are more religions, and I sort of had the idea, well, but only one of them can be right. And it was during that time in high school that, you know, to answer your question, I also found out about people who don't believe and who, let's say, reject the idea of religion. And yeah, I was surprised, but I took that into consideration as well. Because I found out, well, you know, there are people who don't just reject the idea of God, but they reject the idea of a soul, for example. And that was something that took me by surprise. And like, you know, I tried to understand that. So I did also take into consideration the idea that, well, it's not just that only one religion can be true. It's either that or maybe none of them are true. That was something that I...
possible, definitely. Yeah. I'm afraid I have to step away. There's just a little urgent matter I have to take care of, sure. Peter, if you don't mind. Thank you, darling.
Hope you're fine.
Wait, I have no sound. Okay, so I just read out.
Yeah, I just read it out myself too, and I thought maybe.
I forgot to unmute myself. Okay, I'll start over again.
Okay.
We have a question from James Down. I'll skip the part about Darth Dawkins. He's not worth talking about either. So James Downward asked, I'd be interested in to know whether there was an anti-evolution sentiment in the Romanian religious environment as opposed to the old communist state education that would have been pro-evolution. James has a big database on creationist arguments and evolution. So that's where that comes from.
That's a very good question, and I think that's a very interesting question. So first of all, I was born in '96, so 1996. The revolution that did away with communism in Romania and in Eastern Europe in general took place in '89, so 1989. So I was born in freedom, hooray for me.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I'm not like a historian or something. But what I can definitely tell you, even though I was born a couple of years after the revolution and steps towards democracy, is that sort of a communism doesn't just go away like that. Meaning, even if you have like the most reformed government and policies and whatever, even until today, there are some fences, like some. I'm sorry that I know the English word for it, but there are fences made out of iron and some other compound that look very, very ugly. They're like they have no. It's like that communist aesthetics where they choose like colors that sort of autumn colors, something like that. There's a word for it, but. And I was talking to some friends of mine in high school, and I was saying like, well, I know communism is a doctrine, not a style, but those walls, they're really communist, and they agreed, and they do come from the communist era. So what I'm trying to say is that the ghosts of communism, be it old inefficient factories where. Also unsafe factories where people were like dying because the conditions were so horrible or so, were still around. And about that, my parents, there was a sort of a militant communist atheism luring around, Romania and satellite states of the former Soviet Union. But I think there was a sort of a sentiment of rejection of that from some people, simply because the idea of, well, you're a dictatorship and a totalitarian regime. Why should we listen to you? So I think there was
totalitarianism doesn't look good on anyone.
yeah. Welcome back. Hope you're fine.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Anyway, please continue.
Sure. And I think it was quite the opposite effect. It was like, well, we reject creationism and we believe in evolution because, the communists taught us. It was like the communists took away our freedom and our religious freedom. We're going to, at least that's my feeling. And lots of people sort of had it created the quite the opposite effect from what older people, tell me. Yeah.
So I got a question. I got a question for you, because we don't often get people from your part of the world. So this is my opinion. When I look at communism, it is kind of like religion. It uses everything that religion uses as well, and maybe to a certain extreme, even to indoctrinate people, to control people. I think communism itself is more based on religion than anything
like a
else.
Religion.
Yes,
yeah.
And that is
a religious methodology.
Yes.
I can say I agree with Peter. It seems, at least as far as I've seen communist regimes, particularly the more toxic ones, it seems that they object to religion not because it's objectively false, but more because they don't want competition. For like worshipful adoration of the populace.
That was my idea as well. So they needed to eradicate religion because it was competition to their ideology. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would be curious on what you think of that position.
Well, I can definitely see what you're talking about, and there is a certain sense in which I sort of agree with you. But as a Christian, I obviously mainly disagree, and I will tell you why. But there is a truth in that, and I think one of the like stereotypes that are out there on the internet and so on is that, well, you atheists are just like Stalin was an atheist and stuff like that. So
Stalin was a psychopath.
But Stalin was brought up in and I forgot which denomination.
Russian Orthodox. Russian Orthodox.
Okay.
When
So and
trained in the priesthood briefly,
But
and then he left because
I know he went to a theological, but I'm not really interested
I
in
don't
stuff.
necessarily think he finished and became a priest, but he was
Because-
definitely in the school.
yeah, but,
But
so what I was thinking is that he did study that, and he thought that certain parts
He could
of
use it.
religion he could use that in his advance and in his way of communism, if that makes any sense.
yeah, it does, and that's the part where I think I agree. You could definitely take that part of religion, and even in Romania, from what I've heard in the last years of communism, there was like a cult of personality where the supreme leader was more and
Yeah.
more acclaimed. Yeah, but here's the part where I disagree, and I think this is very important. It's like how I distinguish the idea of a religion, which I respect and so on, like what I believe to be a healthy understanding of God and religion, like in Roman Catholicism or Lutheranism, Presbyterianism, you name it, and that's like on one side, that like a positive thing, and then there's on the other side, and there's everything in between, which is a cult, like this Heaven's Gate or so on. And I think where they differ, and where also it differs from communism, which is I would feel like a cult more than a healthy thing,
Cult of personality, definitely.
is I would say, and I'm sort of citing the Bible, but something interesting that Saint Paul says. So Saint Paul mentions in one of his epistles, I really don't remember which one now, but it's famous. If Christ didn't die, or he wasn't resurrected, then your faith is in vain, and so is mine, and all this is. I feel like the distinction is religion in a healthy and in a good sense. It's like, well, here are our beliefs, and we recognize, we have the humility, which is part of our system, to recognize that these are some beliefs that we cannot know for sure. Maybe Jesus
Maybe
didn't
we're wrong.
actually, and in the case, there is like an exit. If Jesus didn't die and he didn't resurrect from the dead, then this is in vain. This is, whether as communism or something, there's no way out. I'm the supreme leader. There's no.
There's one way out.
Yeah. Okay.
That is not the ideal option for anyone. I agree.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with how much time do you spend on YouTube?
I don't know. I guess I spend a lot of time on YouTube.
Fair enough.
But
I don't know. I don't know if you've ever run across Telltale, formerly the
No.
Telltale Atheist, Owen. He is a former Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, I don't know him, but I know the experience of former Jehovah's Witnesses, which
yes,
I would consider more close to a cult. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, that's definitely a cult. And he but I like what Owen does. You may have watched the John Cedars channel. I know John Cedars, Lloyd Evans, he's out now for a while, lives also in, actually he had to move because of the recent earthquakes in Ukraine. But anyway, what Owen has been bringing to the fore is Stephen Hassan's BITE model: behavior control, information control, thought control, emotion control. And this is the attributes of a controlling group.
Yeah.
But instead of just sort of yes, no, Owen has used like a scale, but he uses the Fibonacci sequence so that the lower levels are much lower and then the higher levels spike much higher in terms of how he rates things. And he breaks down a lot of groups and says, this is a bit of a cult-like mentality with the potential to spawn cults. This is definitely a cult.
Okay.
Talking about, say, Mormonism, talking to Jimmy Snow, Mr. Atheist, about his experience as a Mormon and where the sort of the extremes are in that. Because any group, it's best to talk to someone who was there to get the finer points of the details about it. And he's actually had Stephen Hassan on. But those techniques are used in all religion, not always to the same degree, and certainly not to the extremes that you see in like a Heaven's Gate cult, where, I mean, they didn't just say you couldn't be intimate with outsiders. They actually removed the option for many of the men. So, like, that's all the way over into Crazy Town, way over there. But there is definitely a lot of gradient in the application of these things and how much control there is in different groups as well within Christianity. I mean, the sort of cultural orthodoxy that that you described may have had sort of the behavior control of the cultural traditions and imposition, but a lot less perhaps thought control in terms of what you were allowed to think. It was just, as long as you're part of us and do all the things and, you know, have all the parties. I don't know. And that's the impression I'm getting from you. You can tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I definitely think there are these techniques. So yeah, I mean, I think that's for sure. But whether, you know, so first of all, maybe just something that I'd like to correct. It's the sort of a cultural norm here is more of a boring. Like, it's not like it's not like a mafia mentality. You know, if you behave this way, it's sort of a like. Well, why wouldn't you behave this way? I don't get it. It's like,
okay. Well, like, you might. I'm thinking more like you might make your grandmother frown at you.
Yeah, that's the thing.
A wooden spoon, not like you'd end up with a horse head in your bed or anything like that.
One example of this is like in Eastern Orthodoxy, we have this ritual, which I actually consider nice. So during the exact date of 2nd of January, so right after the New Year. We celebrate the baptism of Jesus, and the idea is that priests get to come to your house, and they bless it, you know. And it's just custom. Sometimes they, you know, you just offer them, like, you want to drink something or eat something. And so one time, right, the priest, the local parish priest, like, came to our house, to my mother's, and we invite them over, and they actually agreed to stay. Usually they don't stay because, like, if they eat something at every house, they'll become like this.
Yeah, one cookie and one sip, and then I'll move on.
Yeah, Santa Claus.
Exactly.
And I was very self-conscious. You know, I had this like, oh my God, this is the priest. I don't know. I better. I wasn't trying like to impress or anything, but I better talk something pious to him. You know, and I was like, so I know how's local church core or something like that. And he was actually like, why are you talking about this with me? He was like bored, you know, like he didn't want to talk about religion. He's like the priest. So that was a life-changing experience. So yeah, it's more of the grandma mentality. So to give a stereotype.
And I didn't mean to imply anything harsher than that. There may be small communities where there is, but I think in general, cultural norms are far more imposed by sort of like family togetherness, and they become associated with things like, this is the thing, I genuinely do not like religion, but I don't like, I can see the value in traditions and rituals, and it's just the believing it's all literally real that I have a problem with. If you want to have rituals and had food is the best.
Yeah, no, actually, yeah.
I had a Bible teacher who was like, he kept talking about writing a book about the gospel of food, but how, you know, everybody is always brought together in every major event. We all get together, we eat, and it brings us together.
Yeah. That's true. That was one of the reasons. I actually think there's also the negative side to this sort of innocent-looking cultural behavior, is that you get so dull in it that I think it's good to question, you know. That's why I think, you know, maybe atheists sometimes are more involved than Christians, because I think it's good to take it seriously and to question to the point that, hey, you know, is this actually true? Because if not, well, you know, maybe we could have our rituals or so on, but do we actually believe it? I think that's an important question. And it's
I think it is too. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, I was raised a Christian. I believed sincerely for many, many years, and then I found out, oh crap, this is not true. big deal to me, really big deal. And I still speak to a lot of Christians online who are like, you never believed. And I'm like, yeah, nobody who ever met me as a believer even thought that for a second. They all thought I had grown a second head. If I'd like suddenly been revealed as a hydra or a dragon, they would have been less surprised. So, I do understand taking that seriously. I guess because it seems like you had a lot of stuff to cover in your questioning about religions and ideas and what can I accept and not accept, and sort of, did you arrive at a method for determining what was you thought was true?
I was certainly I'll just make a small parenthesis and I'll come back to this question about what you said that people were like, well, you never believed to begin with, because I find that to be offensive. I think it's also not biblical. Like that's I think that's something hurtful that we as Christians and so can say, and but I had that actually happen to me because when I lived with my mother's in a small town in Romania. It's like a small city, and I had to move to pursue university, and so I studied computer science. And during university, I was already sort of like way more into Roman Catholicism and Lutheranism mainly, but there was this priest who, like, I was starting to find out about logical fallacies and so on, and I realized this one is no true Scotsman, because what he was doing was like, well, if you do X and Y and Z, then you're not a Christian. And I was like, well, it was something like, well, you did what? Well, no true Christian would. And I feel like, oh, that's not really sincere, isn't it? I mean, there are. Even if I did
to associate with the Christians that make me look good and that I agree with in everything, but I still want the numbers of everyone who self-identifies.
And I think that was somehow, in my opinion, that's anti-Christian, because the Christian idea is that the church should be a hospital for the broken, not like you had a child out of wedlock. Well, that's so offensive to our church. You're not a true Christian, or something like that. And I thought
Jesus
that was 100%.
was born out of wedlock, or at least conceived out of wedlock. Just saying.
But to come back to your question about whether I had a method or not, I was sort of looking into this. First of all, I'm just a person, and I'm like stupid, and I have my flaws.
I'm not a computer science degree. I don't think you're stupid.
Well,
aren't we all? I mean, we're stupid.
So,
pretty much, I think pretty much every person is stupid in a certain field.
But you haven't got to know me. I mean.
You're okay. So, now I'm intrigued.
My idea. Well, why I say this is because as a person, I had my biases towards other religion, and for some reason, and this is just my personal experience, I realized, like, well, in some sense there are 1,000 religions. I'm not going to take them all one by one. But I was never into Oriental stuff like Buddhism or not even Islam. For me, it was like, well, it's either Christianity or nothing, which I realized, like, you could be wrong about that. But that was just me. I know. And my method was like, well, I believe that if it's a true church, like the true religion that Jesus founded, it should be able to first of all, it has to be consistent. Like it has to start from Christianity, and then it's not like, hey, by the way, I came up with this idea. My name is the founder of I don't know, X cult
Smith or whatever.
Yeah, and it has to like be able to be reasonable. I mean, if God created his church and he founded his church, as the Bible says and so on, it has to be like, I have to be able to live a full, fulfilling life. And I think this is part of the Christian theology, because one of the persons that I met was a Roman Catholic blogger. His blog is Shameless Pauper, and another one was like, so one of the things that a bishop, a Roman bishop called Robert Barron, that I was trying to educate myself of, said was like, in Genesis, it's written that God says to Adam and Eve to eat of all the fruit, and the way he said he interprets that is that we as humans have the right to flourish, to eat of all the fruits of math and science, and to live a fully human life. And I thought, like, if there's a cult that or a religion that's more close to a cult that makes you, well, I feel like I'm totally miserable, and this makes that must not be it. Also, if it's inconsistent, or like, I was trying to tick them with an X by, hey, this religion has this flaw, therefore it cannot be true. Like, so that was my methodology, and yeah.
I feel like there's something you might find of interest in this topic, because one of the things that I, in my investigations, didn't really look into at first, it came much later, was human psychology. Because you talk about the whole, like, when you originally mentioned Paul and, if Christ is not resurrected, our faith is in vain. Yeah. You see that as accepting that Christianity might be wrong and that you're taking a chance. But I have heard it put as more of a strengthening, like this being, we can't be wrong, or we've all wasted our lives, so clearly we have to all be on board with this. Not that anyone would ever say that directly, but there are a lot of psychological pitfalls that we can fall into that can reinforce even a demonstrably false belief. I remember I was watching this video by Theremin Trees. He's actually a therapist, but he does videos on psychological manipulation, often using certain religious groups as examples of the principle of the thing. But yeah, he did one on prophets where he used a case study of a small cult, like you mentioned, that had, started with this one woman who claimed to have prophecies and blah, 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 blah. And she made a specific end of the world prophecy via automatic writing or some other nonsense, and that the world was going to end and whatever. And then, of course, when it didn't come, she received a message that their little group had been so virtuous that God stopped the apocalypse for them. And it was absurd. But because this happened during the years where a lot of psychologists were like, oh, cults, we should study them. They had planted a couple people in the group just to be like, just find out what's going on and make sure they're not going to blow anything up, and also tell us about how people are reacting and thinking. And aside from just one member who left because the specific demonstrable prophecy had specifically demonstrably failed, and the excuse was quite pitiful, everybody else was more affirmed in their faith by the failure of a prophecy, possibly, than they might have even been by its success. And so, like, that's the kind of thing where I'm like, oh my gosh, human psychology is insane. But these principles of cognitive dissonance, of wanting to, not go after the sunk cost fallacy and let whatever has passed go to waste, as, these kinds of things, I feel like they're not talked about enough. Sorry, dog. But
it's okay.
Say hello to the people. Say hello, puppy. You're so cute. But it's something I think we'd all be well advised to learn about, because not just because manipulative groups and cults and things use them, but even politicians and advertising, not quite to the same degree as like a cult or anything, but they still take advantage of those pitfalls in the mind. And it's good to know how to not be taken advantage of so much.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that was an interesting sort of addition to the conversation for me, at least in my process. I don't know.
I agree, and it's one of the. I try to look obviously at the critiques of Christianity, and for me personally, like in my dark nights of the soul, and I sometimes think these are healthy to a certain degree, but like in my struggle with Christianity, one of the things that I was sort of a concern about was I'm very sympathetic towards Judaism because and I think this is so underrated especially in Romania. It's like we have this idea that so Romanian Orthodoxy, it's like very much 4th to 7th century theological development. So we like use these old Byzantine icons, right? And we're very fixed to that. It's like you're not really allowed to create new art or so on. You're supposed to stick with. There are some variations, like the Russians did their own thing and so on. But
I would.
you're supposed to stick with the old. And one of the strange things is like, okay, you're not supposed to innovate, but then you have people drawing icons with like Saint Mary, the Mother of God, going hand by hand with a little boy, with a child, and he's wearing a Romanian flag, and I'm like, how's that supposed to be not innovative? Or it's.
Oh, that's kind of like the white baby Jesus, and you're like, oh,
yeah,
no, there was
exactly.
no blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby in Bethlehem.
No.
That is not a thing.
And I think what gets so underrated is like we come from Judaism, and Jesus himself was a Jew, and I think we sort of throughout Christianity, this is like a sin that we somehow kept committing, is that we wanted to like get rid of this, and some of the like heresies. Many people tried to get rid of like the Old Testament because it was Judaism and so on. But yeah, one of my because this is related with what you were saying, one of my struggles was Jews don't accept Christ because there are certain things that they claim it contradicts their view of the Messiah. Like the second coming wasn't supposed. It's not part of the Jewish description of what the Messiah will do, and sometimes like the idea of the second coming can feel like that. Like, what if this is just well, Jesus will come and he'll fulfill that. And I can identify, like, I think it is a good idea to sometimes just think about that and analyze that. And I think a healthy like church leader or so on is someone who to a certain extent, again, this is part of distinguishing religion, supposedly true religion, from a perversion of of religion from a cult. It's like, I think you should be allowed to doubt and to put questions, and
and I agree. I not so much with the true religion as I've
supposedly
done a lot of research. I'm just clarifying. I've done a lot of research into Christianity and Judaism, and I've sort of come to the conclusion that the entire thing is that process of perverting whatever was originally there, or basically twisting it towards ends, often political and ideological advantage and stuff like that. But like the idea that, again, I'll quote Thurman Trees, people who don't want you to think are not your friend.
Yeah, I see.
And that's like that. If you a phrase to live by, you could do a lot worse than that. Because if you're in a group in a religion that allows you to think and consider and doubt and is like, oh, maybe we don't know that right now, and is honest about it, we should think about this. That is good. That is how it should be. And I think actually you could equate this back to sort of the communist cult of personality aspect of because it may have begun, the ideas of Marx may have begun with thinking with the legitimate, the poor are being oppressed, we need to do something about it, but it veered off into this cultish dynamic where you couldn't question and you couldn't think and, get the brain in those ruts and just keep going. And yeah, that's always a bad sign. Always.
I do have a question. So I keep mixing up my Eastern European countries. So if I'm not trying to insult, but didn't your country have Ceausescu?
Yeah, he's the leader.
Yeah, people always. I think people always point at Stalin as being the worst. I'm not sure if that's correct. I've read it.
If you're just doing a numbers game, it's usually Stalin is the.
If you're doing the numbers game, maybe. If you look at the personality.
So yeah. I don't know. I think I don't want to go to that scale. Like,
no.
That's just awful.
Yeah, and we're
so
not like that's not your. That's just unfortunate history.
Yeah.
That all of our countries have skeletons.
Yeah.
But I'm very glad that you didn't grow up with him right now. So that's.
But so I do have a question because you said at some point you did start to question, and that's the part that I'm interested in actually.
Okay.
So what did you question and how did you do your research and came to the conclusion that you came to?
So again, I like stupid, but. I thought I should start with the obvious, and the most pressing question for me was like science, because I feel like, there's there's a certain passage in the Bible where Jesus sort of a praise for the apostles. He says, "Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth, Lord." And the idea for mine was like, if religion is true at all, because it's like it can be false. Then it should be true, right? It should be consistent with the truth. So science is truth, right? And I had like this principle: all truth is God's truth. And I try to be educated. So things like evolution and homosexuality and the origins of the universe and stuff like that. And the cultural norm here was like, we're not anti-evolution. We're not pro. We just don't talk about it. No one talks about it. If you bring up like,
were you educated on it in schools properly, or?
That's a very important question. And to be honest, I was a geek and I never liked biology, but I am interested in. So I don't remember those classes, but we actually did have I think. It is presented to us, the theory of evolution, but we're still into that mentality, like, it's just a theory, It's like nobody tells you, it's like,
no, that's not the thing. In science,
it's not that they teach you that; it's that they don't explain it to you. Well, in science, a theory, it's not a hypothesis. It's like the best thing, the most stable model you can.
Exalted, glorious arc. That all things aspire to.
The big part is what people forget is that a theory is made up of facts, and the theory is the explanation that we have for the facts, and that is the part that people always like to leave out because then it might be easier to dismiss. And that
I'm from North America, and the creationists here, they are devoted to miseducating people about evolution so that people think they know what evolution is, and they really have no idea whatsoever. No. But they're very visceral that they don't believe in it, and the thing they don't believe in is like, it's the most ridiculous caricature you can possibly imagine. So I guess I'm glad that wasn't what you dealt with.
It's like again, people are just like, we're going to teach you about it, but it's not like they don't like to get into it. The church teaches its version of things. It's like if you're a fan of Family Guy, there is like a small there's this small spot on evolution, but the Eastern Orthodox response is, what people don't get is that even though dogmatically speaking, Eastern Orthodoxy is very similar to Roman Catholicism. Like, we don't have the Pope, some Christian doctrines, but practically speaking, it's a much more, I don't want to say anti-intellectual, because I would be just too rude, but it's much more like mystical, right? So it's like, well, I don't know, let's pray about it. But I was actually I was a bit disappointed by that, because you were telling about me, trying to find answers. But I was actually very astonished to find out that in their official, like, that Roman Catholics, that they allow you to accept evolution as a fact. And I think it was famously Pope John Paul II who said evolution is not merely a fact. And Catholic priests like I think I forgot his name, but he was a former like director of the Vatican astronomy tower.
The one who discovered what would later be called the Big Bang.
Oh no, that's no.
That's a different.
Yeah, I forgot both of their names. My shame.
I'm terrible with names myself.
Yeah.
I'm completely sympathetic.
George Lemaitre, I think he was.
George Lemaitre was the one who came up with what was called the Big Bang model. Sadly, the Big Bang actually is that name came from the mockery that creationists made about it. So and that kind of stuck.
I believe he called it an expanding egg, but Big Bang was more catchy. So.
Yeah.
So I was very surprised that Catholics actually allowed for this, and it's like if this is what the scientific consensus is, we'll allow you to believe it. And I think that tons of people don't actually know that, and I was very astonished to the fact that they have like even today I find it a pretty nice piece of work. They have their central catechism, like CCC, Catholic Church Catechism. And it's like this big thing where they treat the subjects just like they talk about it. And so I went with an understanding of Christianity where, if all truth is God's truth, and this is true, well, we have to deal with it. And but at the same time, I knew we cannot just it turns out evolution is true. Well, just go with it. So what I was very interested in was, is this also consistent? And in my idea, it was, because you have people like 4th century St. Augustine, who wrote a whole book on, I'm not sure if it's part of the City of God or it's an independent book. I don't remember anymore, but he wrote a whole treatise on Genesis, reading Genesis literary or something like that, where he like mocks the idea of having a literal understanding, like a purely historical understanding of Genesis. I haven't actually wrote the book, but I do believe Roman Catholics when they say that, and I researched that on like Wikipedia and so on. And for me, it was like, well, this means evolution was definitely. I mean, Darwin didn't start writing in 4th century, so this is it means this has a consistency. If you got like such an important church father or person like Augustine. And I think that this understanding where we have a symbolic understanding of things in Roman Catholicism and Lutheranism, or part of Protestantism, is I think it's consistent. Like it's not something. We'll just change the facts to fit.
Well, there is some of that. I mean, there are more conservative splinter groups within Catholicism that can have a fairly significant impact in terms of their political weight, and like the Lutherans, there's a pretty big divide between the kind of in North America, for example, between the literal-minded ones, who also won't let women be in leadership and
pastors,
hate gays and and the more symbolic, accepting not a douche ones, who you know, like, wouldn't refuse to baptize someone because they weren't quite ready to fully affirm the Athanasian Creed. They only wanted to affirm the Nicene and Apostolic Creed. So, you know, like, the sorry, I really don't like the very, very extreme Lutheran groups, but, or, well, not even, it's like half the Lutheran Church in North America. I don't know how that reflects on the Lutheran Church in your area. It's actually, there's this funny Lutheran YouTube channel, actually, and they have a lot of actually very funny videos about.
They have some great videos.
Patrick and Patrick and you're Patrick, and they're
I know
Patrick, the two little guys. But they also are like, they have some other stuff that where you're like, oh God. Oh,
yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah, I know. Yeah. That, you know, that's true. There is this sort of and yeah, that's part of the, you know, dark nights of the soul. Like, why is there this divisiveness, you know, in the church and so on? But
oh, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read. Beach Price said huge conflict took place in the Lutheran Church in Hamilton, Ontario. The church split into two, and apparently they even had fist fights. I'm like, dude, Lutherans, dude. I expect that of the Irish at the pub, but come on.
It can get worse. We did have a lot worse when the Protestants first started.
The 30-year wars, yeah.
Yeah, so... Yeah.
Slaughter of the Huguenots. Oh God, there's so much history.
But I'm still getting back to the single point. So about your research, did you find anything regarding your particular religion that you thought, well, okay, now I need to. This confirms what I believe, or how did you go about that?
Yeah, well. It's been sort of hard for me in that sense. I'm not really like, I'm still Orthodox, but I really mostly go to a local Lutheran church. And you were asking about how Lutherans are here. Well, I would say Lutherans here are mostly very liberal. Like, you know, they ordain women priests, and like they will commune you with, and you know, that's not like Catholics are more conservative in that, and that's maybe not. But I did feel like, there's certainly, I feel like I ticked all the problems that I've seen, like modern, like the problem of sexual orientation and you know what you do about that, of evolution and science in general, when it comes to Catholicism and this maybe more liberal, if you want, side of Lutheran, of Protestantism, and that's obviously not the only criteria. Like you can have something that fully agree. It still can be, you know, a wrong,
consistent but wrong.
Yeah, like it's like, you know, like I've heard Aristotle had this model of the world. Like in his mind, he could explain physical phenomena by saying, you know, the world is compound of just 5 elements, like water.
Yeah, but magnets were magic.
Yeah. And he was like, well, you know, lava
I have read that, man, and he was like, you can't explain the lodestone. You just say it's its nature. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, oh, my God, honey. Oh, honey, no.
There's a page with strange things Aristotle taught. And, you know, one of them was that there was a certain fish who he looked for, like the reproductive part of the fish. And he was like, well, it has none, so the only viable explanation is that this fish came out of dust.
Oh, like vitalism. Oh,
yeah. And then he numbered the teeth of women and men, and he came to the conclusion that women have less teeth or something like that. I don't know. So there are strange things in Aristotle.
Yeah.
But
He has some interesting.
but
Oh, okay. I'm not going to facepalm that much. We'll have that discussion another
what I
time.
was trying to say was that I was very amazed to the idea that Aristotle had this model of like the world is compounded of 5 elements, like water, air, the basics, and he could like explain things like, well, lava gets up to the sky because it's made out of air, but then the earth side it's much more stronger, and therefore it gets back to the earth. And this was like it made sense, but the premises were false, right? So you had this sort of a. I realized, well, you can have a very consistent argument, like the premises, the conclusion follows the premises, but the premises are false. So it's valid, but it's not sound.
And that's true. Yeah, that is definitely a thing to look out for. And I mean, usually if you keep digging, you'll find inconsistencies in these things. Whereas, maybe the first two questions you're okay, but then by the third you're like, ooh,
yeah,
there's a problem.
I feel like the answer to this, Peter and Lilith, was to me like also, if Christianity is true, like against that big if, but it won't be just like, okay, maybe I fulfilled my consistencies and so on, but I think it also has to be consistent with what it says. So like, do I feel somehow? Can I like? Do I feel something when I pray? What is my prayer life and so on? And I something that I think again Augustine said, and C.S. Lewis maybe. I don't know if he built on that or it was like independent, but something that Augustine famously said that. And then again, it's presupposing we do have souls, but our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, Lord. And C.S. Lewis, what I feel something similar that he said was, that you don't have a feeling of, like emptiness, or you don't miss something you never initially experienced. Like I cannot.
If I find in myself a desire that no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable conclusion is that I am meant for another world. Mere Christianity.
Thank you. Yeah, that was it. And well, I know there are some refutations to that. I think both as as atheists and theists, we can agree that I used to have a joke with one of my friends in high school that there was like this place where more upper class people used to went to in vacations, and he used to joke like, I wish I go there again. And I knew him, and it was, when did you ever went there? And he was like, well, I never went there, but I wished it before. So in reality, that doesn't happen, right? I don't miss going to Honolulu. Maybe I want to go there because I already have some ideas of, like, I saw pictures of it and so on. But I don't really miss smoking if I've never smoked, or yeah.
See, and this is actually something where I think evolution might have a point against that. One of the, for better or for worse, much of what has driven humanity to gain greater knowledge has been a kind of restless curiosity, always looking for something. And that restlessness has served us very well sometimes. It can backfire tremendously at times. I'm not saying it doesn't. But it's also, on the whole, it's given us a lot. I realize that's a less emotionally satisfying answer, but it's also one that I can see all of the elements of how that plays out and the consequences and why that would be beneficial to us. And admittedly, different people experience different sorts of restlessness, and it drives them in different directions. So I don't find that it's a single unified type of it's
well,
partly a common experience, but not.
Keep in mind keep in mind that this is an evolutionary thing, because if you're going to look for an explanation for a certain thing, it might keep you alive. So if you at the start, back when we were still lesser apes, if you heard a sound in the bushes, it could be a lion, or it could be the wind. If you're
false positive.
yeah, if you
I
think
feel like the lion, that's the safer mistake to make.
if you keep
Yeah.
if you keep to the fact that it might be a lion and you get away, you will survive. If you make the mistake of thinking that it might be the wind, you could be eaten. So there is an evolutionary advantage in coming up with an explanation that might even be wrong, and it will still work, and it will still be beneficial to your species. So
At least in the short term work. Yeah. And that's,
yes,
I mean, those snap decisions and instincts, it does lean towards false positives. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it's just something we have to be aware of in our own psychology. That when we make an error, it will likely be in this direction as opposed to the other direction. That doesn't necessarily mean that all positives are false, clearly.
Yeah.
But it's sort of like, if I want something to be true, I put that as a point in the con side. It doesn't convince me that the thing is not true,
Yeah.
but it's I sort of take one mark away just to be safe, because I know I have my own biases, and everyone is just like, oh, but I really want the cake to be there, and just
Yeah,
let me
sure.
pretend the cake is there.
Yeah.
We're all human. What can I say?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that's I agree. I just agree. I think that's true, and I think it is important that we look at our own biases and inclinations, and you can certainly view it that way and make that argument. But I think something that's maybe equally true. Well, okay, I don't know. Maybe it's not equally, but I think something that's
You
worth
can consider it.
worth considering is one of the things that sort of like initially, made me question my upbringing and so on was sometimes, because I mentioned like Eastern Orthodox is way more somehow mystical, like pious, as opposed to like more not the but yeah. Sometimes there would be an people would get overzealous bias, like, and they would make up things like, "Did you see that?" And I was, even as a kid, I was like, "What? The Holy Ghost? That was the Holy Ghost? Are you talking about that pigeon?" Yes, and the sort of a maniac, crazy look of like,
okay, I'm gonna go over here now.
yeah, and one of the things, like, I think we were definitely way more biased. Like, if you just look at the medieval period, or even way before. But I think something that's worth taking into consideration now, with that we pretty much scientifically speaking develop much more, is maybe we tend to be biased on the other side as well. Like, there are certainly advantages if a god wouldn't exist. Like,
Oh, it's possible. It's kind of funny. I didn't really see those until I stopped believing. Then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I did not think this was going to be awesome. I thought this was terrible.
I think, we too often make the argument like, wow, it's really nice to believe that grandma is in heaven and he's watching over you. But it's like, it's also equally, I mean, it would be the idea that, there would be a judgment, and there would be sort of eternal consequence. I think that's also very suiting. Like, well, wouldn't it be cool if there was just nothing? And so I think we can be biased
more than they fear pain. But yes, I do see your point. And it's honestly, I think the idea of someone constantly reading my thoughts was probably creepier to me in the long run.
Yeah, that can. He's watching you and you're going to bathroom.
Like, off,
Yeah.
God, what are you, some sort of peeping Tom? Ah!
Yeah. So
Don't frickin'
you know.
make a flower. Go away.
Yeah.
Shoo. But yeah, fair enough. And that is the kind of stuff that, but then those ideas can also serve to keep you locked in a way that is not entirely rational either. I just have one question, because listening
Sure.
to you, you've been, very honest about, not necessarily being certain of everything. And, would you say in some senses that you're still
Oops. And Lilith froze. Lilith, you wanna refresh?
kind of question? Hello?
Yeah.
I can hear. Yeah. You. Sorry. You had a
Sorry, there
lag.
was a little
Yeah.
bit.
It was right when you were asking the question. So. if
Yeah.
you could-
Sorry, I was just asking
No.
if you still consider yourself basically to be, I guess, questioning as you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I do. And but I don't think that excludes me like from.
That doesn't mean you're not a Christian. I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah. Not you. Not you. Not also you. Okay.
I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna know true Christian all over you.
Yeah, no, I think that there is this. I will make references, but these are people who, like, I genuinely found that cared about this topic and helped me, and I think they helped a lot of people, like people who have same-sex orientation and so on, and that side of the church who many would simply look at as begone. There was this again Roman priest called, so his name is James Martin, and one of the things that he said, as he is educated in this, so I will believe him, was that there is this very small sequence in the gospel with Jesus and Nathaniel where I think so. I'm not that, but it's basically told like nothing good comes out of Galilee, or no prophet comes out of Galilee, and
Yeah.
yeah, there's this sort of a like, who the heck are you? But this priest, like Father James, said, well, that's actually a bit of humor, and I hope I'm not mixing up the verses, and my memory is failing me, but. Yeah, he's sort of like poking Jesus around. So one of my experiences was that I tend to be biased here because I don't know Jesus in the sense that in the crazy sense, like I know Jesus.
You never went for burgers.
Yeah, but I feel like the way authentic, and this must be like if Paul or Jesus didn't live an authentic faith, then who did? I think like an authentic faith is like, again, as you mentioned, it must be radically different from a cult, and should allow you to like we do question at times, and we do have doubts sometimes. I mean, Jesus himself is like my God, why have thou forsaken me? Or
he quoted the Psalms. I gotta say though, there's a lot of stuff attributed to Jesus that sounds exactly like a crazy evil cult leader.
Yeah, I do struggle with some things myself. I'd say especially the Gospel of Matthew for me has some things that most of them I really got an understanding, like, somebody explained this to me, and it seems consistent with Judaism or Jewish culture and thought, and it makes sense. Like,
anyone who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and anyone who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me, and anyone who does not take up his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. That is some Heaven's Gate shit.
Yeah.
And ironically,
also
something Muhammad said, roughly equivalent.
Yeah.
Would it be safe to say for you, Dan, that the part you take away from Christianity is trying to improve yourself as a human being? Is because I've noticed that in a lot of Christians,
Yeah.
That they say I'm a follower of Jesus, and so their interpretation of Jesus is always as a really good person, caring,
Yeah.
thinking about other people. Is that what you take away from this as well?
No, I wouldn't. So I would say if I have to take away in the sense that eliminate, like ignore something like that, something from Christianity, then I wouldn't be a Christian, to be honest. Like if because this is part of my idea. Like if you manage to find something that this is like totally, I know, unexplicable or ridiculous or so, then you can basically throw it away, and you should be free to do that. I try to find an understanding that not just should fit me and should make sense, but again should also be like consistent. Like I should find some evidence. Well, again, well, this really is part of the Jewish culture to say if you don't hate mother and father, to be like, for instance, my understanding is that somehow the Jewish language, well, definitely rich and very poetic. They had very interesting things, like they had numbers for letters, and there is this guy, this computer science professor.
Oh, the Bible code guy. Yeah.
No. Uh, he's actually a Lutheran. That's funny. Donald Knut. He's an American, and so he's also a Lutheran and a believer, and he made like this poem based on Jewish numerology, based on the Old Testament, and it's something on his public website. It's beautiful. But to get back to your question, because I'm deviating a bit, I feel like the understanding of that radical thing that Jesus said was like a method of comparison, like compared to how much I love you, I hate others. Like, sort of to create a huge gap. Like, the requirement would be, obviously not to hate others, because
I realize it's meant to be a comparative,
Yeah.
but I still think that's wildly inappropriate. And I think ordered love is incredibly wrong. And I think anyone who thinks that they are entitled to your love is not.
Yeah, that's true. But I think that's part of the understanding of free will, is that God doesn't want us to be like robots who follow him out of
But then that's inconsistent with the previous statement, with the idea that we should love him so much more that we hate our families in comparison. Like, that level of adoration is only found in, well, you could program it into a mindless robot, but generally I would only see it in cult indoctrinees. Now, again, I realize there are people who take that far more literally than other people, and that could be far more damaging in that sense, but it's still there, like you say. Okay, I have one question. I don't know if you'll have an answer for it, but if you don't, I just want you to think about it.
Sure.
What would disprove Christianity for you? And separate, but also basically the same question, what would disprove the existence of God in your mind?
Okay. So I think as to Christianity, if there would be like, I think most strongly would be, I think there are a lot of things in my life, sometimes one of the toughest questions that I managed to put myself was like, if God is all sufficient, and he doesn't need anything, he doesn't, there's this classical concept of God, that God's all knowing, all powerful, he's all sufficient. So why would he maybe create us in the first place? Like, why sometimes it's like
bored.
Historical, if someone was like to manage to like prove like, well, the apostles they're fake, or Jesus never resurrected, or I don't know, Jesus somehow something about Christianity that it's
Can can I jump in real quick on that, because that is the most common answer or answer a common argument that I get. The choice isn't just between they were fake or it was true. There's also the option that they were mistaken. It always gets to me when people say, "Well, you're an atheist, and you're telling me that Jesus was a liar." I'm not telling you Jesus was. No, I'm not telling you Jesus.
I'm not even entirely convinced the man existed. So
I'm not. That same goes for me. But it just keep in mind that he could also just have been wrong, and that there's nothing that doesn't make him a bad person. That does,
or the whole rest of it.
It doesn't automatically make someone a bad person. You can be wrong. Believe it or not, humans across the world have been wrong about things. Yeah. It has happened. So
well, not me. But...
you're infallible. I kid.
Hey, if I was infallible, got out. I wouldn't have been a Christian.
You got out of the story in time because you were Adam's ex-wife. So you failed. So
well, he wouldn't have been such a wuss.
But I think that we cannot emphasize this enough, that there are more options than being fake and being true. There's a myriad of options.
And the legendary option too isn't necessarily that someone went and decided, I am going to make up a story and rule the world. It's more like Snopes. You know about Snopes?
No.
Oh, it's a fact-checking website. They initially began with before, back in the day, you'd get those emails that went around. Oh, Microsoft is going to send 5 cents for everybody who forwards this email, or the child with no legs because blah 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 blah. And there'd be stories that would go around. Oh, someone's handing out perfume samples and knocking people out with chloroform and blah 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 blah. So basically, they would find out where these stories had originated as best as they could and be like, okay, this is fake, this is why, this started from this, but what is said there is fake. And a lot of the time, there would be maybe a fictional story that was understood as being true, and then it grew into something else, and then someone else attached an unrelated experience to it that, but it made sense when they heard it to make the attachment, but it wasn't actually related. And then, and then it turns into this thing. And it's not that anyone is deliberately being dishonest at any point in the process. It's just there's misunderstandings and, mental tricks your mind plays and rewrites as you retell a story and blah, 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 blah. And then you end up way over here. And that's not what you end up with is entirely legendary, even though you can't actually say for certain that anyone deliberately lied along the whole string of it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think, that's something that we as Christians should learn from you guys and so on. I think there's also, it's definitely not a dilemma. So it's that would be a false dichotomy, and it's also not. I don't think it's where I disagree with C.S. I think it's C.S. Lewis who famously pointed a famous trilemma, like he's either God, he's either a liar, or he's crazy. And I watch one of Matt Dillahunty's his videos, where he talks about maybe it could be myth, or there's so much other things, but I think here is maybe one of the things again where this is I could be wrong, or it's my life experiences. I'm not asking anyone to, but I do feel like anyone can trick himself into believing anything, like dedicate your life to a false cause, even if it's noble or good or true. But I did see the fate lived out in people so much better that I did and probably will ever manage to do, like especially in some women, in some Catholic nuns that were just making some videos on the internet and so on. And I feel like there is a certain almost I don't want to say unexplainable, but almost unexplainable, like a joy and a sense of community and fellowship. And I know we as people we tend to do that, right? We're evolutionary bound to build societies and stick up together and so on. But I want to say
we're social animals, so it is literally what we do.
Yeah. But I did feel almost like I was almost envious of people who claim they have a calling and they have an understanding of.
There's a deep sense of serenity in feeling so absolutely certain of something, and I do know that feeling. I have actually felt that kind of certainty about something, where you just feel completely safe and secure in this understanding. I have, however, had that be wrong.
Yeah.
And it feels great. It really does. But it doesn't guarantee truth.
Sure, it doesn't. But one of the things that really impressed me with those Catholic, I think YouTube is full of, I know what's up to Catholic nuns, but awesome. They make videos on YouTube for some reason. It was so different. Yeah. It was so different from did you see the Holy Ghost in that pigeon? So from that, like, almost psychotic, like...
yeah, you get that from the evangelicals in North America. It's
almost here as well. So one of the things that we do, again, similar to Catholics somehow, is that in order to canonize someone in Eastern Orthodoxy, they have to have like 3 confirmed miracles. I totally reject that, but yeah, that's a... And there was this recent saint who they like canonized, and it was a whole controversy here, but what it ended up doing, it was like this woman who she claimed, she saw, she prayed to the guy, and a miracle happened to her, and they the local priests and so on interviewed her, and the miracle was that she actually saw the spirit of the deceased person, and she saw it in the, almost quoting the gospel, but in the light of a pigeon. And what I believe is that she literally saw a pigeon, and she was so, as you say, we sometimes get so hooked up into our own feelings and so on that,
this is the perfect cue, because the past few days I've been messing on Twitter with a certain Christian apologist, and we like to refer to her as she who shall not be named. And she is now she who's no longer on Twitter. So, I don't know.
Oh my God, it's Christmas. Terrible human being.
Yes.
I understand you are both technically identified as Christian. I do not equate you two in any way, Dan. Please understand. You are not the same type of thing.
If anything, we can make clear is that we've had a couple of people on recently. All of them are better people than this particular person, and that's not it's not even that hard, actually.
You have to tell me about this later, Peter.
I will. I just heard. You didn't catch it in the side chat. Jen with one N shot me a DM.
Hi, Jen.
And so.
See,
she didn't. Hold on. Beach. She didn't get booted. She deactivated the account. So no idea what happened there. But in the meantime, we've come up to an hour and a half, and I still have a question from Beach Price, actually. And if I get my mouse to working, I might even be able to put it up on screen. This is so incredibly irritating. Okay.
But they do.
No, that's not it. I got the wrong one. Hold on. There we go. Beach Price had a question specifically for you, Dan. she said, does he know how much of an effect Samaritan's Purse had on Romania with their shoebox campaign? And I have no clue. This is new to me, but maybe you know.
I participated on, so I know. I participated on it's like at least what I did. So when I was still in college, I used to live in college dorms. So like there's this place set up by the university where you live there basically as a student because you come from another place. So and we used to do like, I honestly don't remember if you would actually pack shoes, because I know shoes are like a major problem in the world generally. Lots of people don't actually have shoes in many parts of the world. Or you would just put gifts in general. I don't remember what I did, and it was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's usually other stuff like
and we get a follow-up question because I don't know. Can you briefly explain what this was? Because a lot of people.
It was like it was like a campaign where you would simply put up things. I don't remember if shoes or general things, but you would put them for the needy.
Yeah. My grandma did this as well. Actually, she right up until the day she died.
I think that's what she's talking about.
Yeah, you take a shoe box because you can wrap them and you can open them and show the contents to security without just sort of unwrapping and making a mess of it. And you can send to children in needy countries or children in rough areas, and you'll have there'll be some gifts and paper and pens and toothbrushes and just like necessities, but also a few fun things. And I don't know. I think you're probably not allowed to put foodstuffs in there, even if it's just
probably
Nerds
not,
Rope, when every child should have Nerds Rope. But
okay.
But it was just a way to be able to send individual packages mainly to kids and just anyone who needed some basic necessities, and especially around Christmas time.
Yeah, that was the shoebox thing. Was not because you put shoes, but because it was the box was like from a you're right. I do remember a bit more. To answer the question, but first of all, I really apologize, Lilith. I think I sometimes speak over you, and I'm sorry for that.
That's
okay.
That's probably because at times there is still a lag. StreamYard is fairly new, and it does still have its glitches every once in a while. So, but yeah, as I said, we come up to the hour and a half. I need to bring up something that the people aren't aware of, because in our initial we always do an intake to see whether or not a guest can join, and you said you already had a couple of notes on topics that you wanted to throw at us. So I'm hoping that you had a good time during this show, and that you want to come back with your list of topics.
Yes, because when you come back, you get to pick the topics, and you get to see if you can stump me.
So
bring it on.
I'd be looking forward to doing that, and so people in the side chat agree. Have him back.
Each agrees. Have him back.
Yeah,
come back, Dad. Okay, this is good.
Yeah.
I'll think about it, and thank you very much. You've been very. I'm genuinely it was a nice conversation.
Well,
I think
I'm very pleased you feel that way. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and you've been very honest and nice.
I recall you saying that you might not be that interesting. It might not be worth filling an hour and a half. Apparently, it did. So and apparently people in the chat enjoyed the conversation. So always keep that in mind. Someone's jealous because Lilith had her dog on. Someone needs to be.
Oh, who's the cute puppy? Who's the cute puppy? Okay.
So I wanna thank everyone in the chat. Beach Price says, "Nice to meet you, Dan. He's nice." So okay. We've had different comments when we had guests on, so that's a good comment.
Yeah, we've had some interesting ones.
Yeah.
They were not all.
Yeah.
They were not all the gem that you are, Dan.
No, no, no. So
Thank you.
we'd love to have you back and see what topics you've come up with. So any last things you wanna get out?
Yeah, I want to say wish everyone have a nice evening or morning, and I wish you all stay safe while still during the pandemic, and I really hope all of you and your loved ones are doing fine and are taken care of in this sort of a hard pandemic time. And again, it was it was just a nice conversation. I think there are many things I could think of, and I really hope you feel the same. That's
Yeah,
all.
absolutely. It's always interesting and pleasant to have a conversation with someone who's honest and interested in talking about and maybe considering things. And I really appreciate your openness in that. And that's been very, very pleasant. It's been nice to talk to, some Christians who are willing to be honest with the edges of what they understand, because none of us know everything. But it's far less fun to talk to people who think they know everything.
Yeah, and it's a lot more fun if the conversation is not a contest and
Yeah.
trying to win a contest, because there is no win in the end. But I like the thing you ended with. I want to address the people who watch this. Stay safe, wear a mask, and we'll see you back soon. Lilith, thanks again for joining,
My pleasure as always, Peter.
and we'll be back soon. We also will be back with a completely new show. I'm hoping that I can start promoting that really soon. But so keep an eye on Twitter. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and catch you all next time. Bye bye.